Hello and welcome to another episode of The New Frontier. I'm joined, as always, with Joe. Joe, how are you?
I'm really good. I actually realized that I've drank too much coffee, so I feel very jittery. So forgive me if I'm kind of like
Start
shuffling on
jumping
my
up and
chair.
down.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's too much coffee today. It's Monday.
So, how's? I know last time we spoke, you were kind of preparing for speaking in the Nordic Summit. How's that going?
Yeah, it's good. I am basically next week. Oh my God, it's next week. Next week, I am going to be speaking at the AMA Nordic event. I have prepared a super actionable workshop all about AI and also like an amazing sort of hack blast, I would say. So it's going to be really good content. Yeah, I just wanted to say that for our listeners, especially, there is also a discount on the tickets for AMA Nordic. So if you want to join me and listen to my excellent content, use JOLA20 code at the checkout. So there you go. That was my promo blast. Thanks, Max.
Great. And I'm very excited this week. So as the podcast has been growing in listeners and views and everything else, we have started to get a barrage of kind of applicants to come on, and we have not accepted any of them. Everyone we have accepted so far has been someone that either myself or Joe knows. But this guest actually is someone who I had listened to on a few podcasts before, and then when his VA reached out, I thought, "Wow, this is a cool person, and we'll accept our first inbound, and we'll get them on." So, Yoni Kozminski is a global digital marketing entrepreneur with 15 years of experience working with Mercedes-Benz, MasterCard, Sony, and several e-commerce eight-figure brands. And I will bring him out. And yeah, well, hey, Yoni, how you doing?
Max, Joe, pleasure to be here. Excited to be the first of the inbound or outbound.
First, and we don't plan to do it again. We're booked up for another about 6 months. So we really don't do it often because we want to kind of, as you were saying before, like we want to really preserve the kind of quality of the guests we get on. But as I mentioned, I listened to one of your podcasts. I can't remember which one it was, and I thought it was just super interesting in terms of like the strategy and someone who's been there and done it in the e-commerce space, and is really operating at now a high level. So I thought it'd be a really interesting conversation. But before we get into it, why don't you just give a bit more of a background about yourself and what you're focusing on at the moment?
For sure, yeah. I'll build on a few things you said there. So I spent the first decade of my career as there was not really social media for brands or digital marketing in general. So I launched Mercedes-Benz Australia, New Zealand's Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Pinterest. I was the largest Facebook media buyer in Australia for a couple of years with Mercedes-Benz. We were spending a whopping $250,000 a year, which is just laughable to think about in today's day and age. 2009, 2010, how much that seemed and how little it is. But everything from web development, design, content production, as I said, SEO back in the old school days where it was a little bit less kosher. Let's put it that way. You could get away with keyword spamming. And then I moved to the US, and there I was with the likes of MasterCard, Medtronic. So always, I think the most important thing to sort of grasp for listeners is I worked actually at small agencies. So I was the 10th employee in the Australian agency. We grew to about 30. I was the 15th in Los Angeles. We grew to about 45. So I got the experience of what it was to work in like a really fast-paced, fast-growing agency, doing everything. I was sitting in the creative meetings. It wasn't passing it over to a creative director. You would sit in there and you'd come up with the brainstorms. I was buying the media personally. So, I had a really good feel for all this stuff and saw what it was to work with really large companies. And then fast forward to sort of 7 years ago when I moved to Israel, I met a couple of guys that had an e-commerce business. It was very Amazon centric. I came in thinking, hey guys, let's go to D2C, like let's build a real brand here. Let's make it super valuable. And, this was 2017. I saw the PPC conversion rates back then. It was at like 25%. And the founder says to me, yeah, they're a little bit low the last few months. I said, forget everything I've said. We're just focusing on Amazon. And so that was sort of my journey into the Amazon space, which is a little bit different to the typical sort of Amazon founder or e-commerce founder, where I'd come from big companies and then found my way into sort of growing that business. What we did in that company was we built systems, processes, we built out the functions from customer support all the way through to creative direction, project management, the whole way through the business. And lo and behold, it grew pretty quickly. It grew from 2 to 5 million in about 12 months. I think it was the first acquisition that Thrasio did into this geography. I think it was the first of many. And so today, instead of getting straight back into the e-commerce and Amazon game, what my co-founder and I realized is that we could help a lot of people take what we were able to create there and allow them to emulate it. So help them understand how to build the right processes and systems, how to actually identify what are the right functions that you can bring in, the right talent, and then bring in not VAs, but high-level talent, people that are, project managers, designers, PPC managers, Amazon brand managers. I mean, the list goes on effectively, but we have two companies. We have Multiply Me, which is executive search and HR, effectively an HR business partner into the Philippines, where we find high-level talent. And we have a Scala, which is a boutique process improvement consultancy that comes in, assesses the business, builds the current state process documentation, helps everything from building an accountability and org chart all the way through to documenting sort of the future state SOPs. And just the last thing I'll share is, to give you guys a bit of context, we grew from a team of the two of us to 120 in about 12 months. Today, we've learnt, I would say, a lot of lessons of what it is to scale too quickly. And so we've dialed back our operation to about 85 people today. And, there's a lot of lessons to be learnt on trying to grow too quickly, trying to build in functions that you have no idea about, to, what is the right pace and how to approach it. So apologize on the long intro, but obviously want to make sure that we can have a good conversation and give the people some high value insights on the back of, a lot of mistakes I've made over the course of my journey.
That's really interesting. It's quite a journey. And I have to say, the sort of, I know very well the path of not coming from a sort of a pure seller background into the space, but actually from an agency background and doing this. I actually wanted to pick on something that you said right at the start. We will talk about what you're doing right now, but what I found very interesting is when you came from the premise of working with big organizations and saying, hey, you guys need to build a brand, you need to go to D2C, and then you saw that on Amazon, like crazy conversion rates, scrap that. Do you think that this has now completely changed in 2024 and actually the sort of the tables have turned and maybe there is actually more value in starting the other way around the process, which is build a brand and then scale it on Amazon?
The short answer is yes, but I will say with the caveat that there definitely are, and I do come across people that are so well adept to understanding sort of what the people want based on that keyword research. And so it is still possible to launch really profitable brands that are just sort of marketplace focused. But I'd say the general rule, and I think my position as well, is that today, moving forward, that you really need to build a holistic approach. You need to have D2C and marketplace. And I think that, you're missing opportunities if you're not in both capacities. Mm-hmm. And there's pros and cons to both. Amazon is going to give you the traffic, amazing, but it's going to come at a cost. And so looking at that LTV, you're going to have challenges there. Building D2C, you have to create your own traffic. And so the CAC, the cost per acquisition, likely higher unless you can build some really intelligent strategies to drive that traffic and own that relationship with a customer. So in short, I think you need to have both.
Mm-hmm.
So I want to take the conversation towards kind of business structure and scaling. And it's something that is very timely for us. We've just, as listeners may know, we've just raised our seed. So we've got a bunch of cash, and the reason I was late to this call is I was arguing with my co-founder about the hiring strategy of certain personnel. We've added 2 people to the team since then. We're considering a third. So I guess question number one for let's imagine most people listening are either an agency or kind of a e-commerce brand. or if you're me in startup, your what are your right KPIs when you think it's ready to start scaling the business in terms of headcount?
Yeah. So I think there's a lot of ways that you need to sort of look at this equation, right? Obviously, Max, you've come into a bit of capital. Congratulations on the raise, by the way, here. But I think the way that you sort of approach when is the right time to scale or what does it look like will look different to different types of businesses. If we're looking at a pure service-based business, generally speaking, if you don't do silly things like we did and try and build too many businesses too quickly, they should be turning, the cash conversion cycles. You should be able to effectively produce cash before you're even actually doing the work if you're doing things correctly. So it probably gives you a little bit more breathing room, for example, to say, I only need to bring on this one person to alleviate me to actually focus on, all the areas that I know that I can continue to grow the business on, which is quite different, I would say, to an e-commerce business where, cash conversion cycles are not great. You're spending a lot of money on inventory. If you're not tracking that journey meticulously and things do go awry, then you're in a different, you can be in a different place. So coming back to your question, like when is the right time to start scaling or who do you bring on? I would say like for really early stage founders, people who are like hiring for the first time and don't really have a tremendous amount of experience and they're trying to say, well, what should I pawn off first? What's the first thing that I should bring on? I would say like a really simple exercise is to block out every aspect of what you're doing on the day-to-day. So, anyone in my company knows my calendar, knows that everything's not only blocked out in time, but also color coded. And it's very, very clear what I'm working on at what time and what percentage of my time is spent on internal meetings, marketing and sales efforts, partnerships and relationships, all the really fun stuff like finance and legal. But coming back to it, really assessing and saying to yourself, right, what are the things that need to be me? And when I say need to be me, I can't just hand it off to someone to even get to 80% of the way there. I think for an e-commerce founder, for example, it's going to be what is the sign off on what the product actually is? What are we bringing to market? For you, Max, very likely, what is the product roadmap? What are the next most important features that we want to release to market? So that would be a 5, something that is the market research around competitors where everyone loves to have a bit of a look around and say, right, they've got these incredible bells and whistles and features, or I love what they've just released, or whatever that looks like. That might be a 1 or a 2. So building it and then building effectively like an accountability or a job description, if you will, around similar linked tasks or if it's finance or if it's creative, don't try and bring that into a single person. It'll fail. You get a jack of all trades and a master of none, but try and sort of skill bundle on those things to bring in individuals. I would say that's like for an entry level person. If you're a little bit more established as a business and you have, let's just say you have a clear 12-month roadmap, you understand where you need to be in that 12 months and you have a handful of team members already, that's when you can be probably a little bit more methodical about your approach. So I would say, there's a couple of different methods on how you can bring on people, but the first method that I like, which is called the scorecard method, is where you would effectively look at it and you'd say, right, if this is my 12-month roadmap and this is what I want to achieve here, then I am going to look to build a specific mission, 1 or 2 lines that denotes the person that I'm bringing in. What does success look like? If I bring them in, how do they get me closer to that goal? And on the back of that mission, what I'm going to look to do is then have 3 to 8 outcomes. So they need to achieve these 3 to 8 things in order to be successful in their mission. And when I look to actually start hiring or interviewing for that role, what I want to look is what attributes, what historic attributes, what character traits, what's, again, 3 to 8 things that someone will need to have. And so that becomes, a very simple blueprint into saying, this is what I need to achieve by the next 12 months. I need these 1, 2, 3 missions achieved, and I can effectively build clarity on what they need to achieve. And so that's where you start to build into things like more meaningful accountability charts. I think, whether you're even established or new business, I think one of the, pitfalls that most people fall into is that they don't truly hand over accountability. They still are the end of that sort of laundry list of tasks that someone needs to achieve. And, a big part of, what I hope people take from when they hear me speak is how do they get themselves out of their business, and how do they actually find themselves in a position where they're focused on the things that both give them energy and drive the business forward. And that doesn't mean that you have to be the sales and marketing person. If you love product and that's your happy place, you don't want to talk to a single person, then find a way into that seat and find those complementary people to help, augment how you're operating on the day-to-day.
I mean, this is super valuable. And I think actually setting yourselves kind of KPI and scorecards for every process and sort of thinking long-term is super valuable exercise. I think not everyone does that exercise. I have a question, which is more like sort of to continue on what you just talked about. A lot of our listeners are sellers and Amazon sellers. Obviously, the sort of typical profile is someone who starts like an Amazon business kind of on the side, starts doing everything by themselves, learns everything because they are very fast learners, very keen. And then they get into this point where their business is going well, but they feel overwhelmed by all the tasks, but they also feel that if they hire people, they have to train them, so they don't have time. How would you advise someone who is in this position where, they have a nice 7, even 8-figure business, but they are just kind of juggling everything and feel like they can't actually let go to someone else?
Joe, awesome question. I should say, I feel like you guys are just like throwing me absolute softballs up in the air here to hit out of the park. I'll say, I want to share before I sort of go into answering your question. You said that a lot of listeners are agencies, e-commerce, Amazon businesses, and you specifically asked about sort of how do you build from, a side hustle all the way through to, 7, 8 figures and profitable business. I'll share with you guys a bunch of links, but I have different org charts that show you how you can build sort of small and growing e-commerce businesses, different ways to structure your agency, as well as like what it would cost to hire, what talent you could hire in the Philippines, and what it should cost you, as in like the salaries that you should be paying. So I'll shoot over those resources for you guys because I think you'll find them valuable. And I have literally a 40-minute presentation that talks through how to go from, it's effectively a case study of a woman that we worked with that built a brand as a side hustle that went from, nothing to $1 million in her first year. She more than doubled up in year 2, did the same in year 3, moved from side hustle to full-time when she was doing about $4 or so million. And then she hits about $5 million in year 4 and gets stuck in her own way. And it's all about how she grew a further 6 million the next year and all the steps that she took. So I have a video as well as the downloadable presentation deck that, again, I'll share these assets with you guys. Moving on beyond that, so just let's talk a little bit about what that journey was at a high level. So I was talking to you about how for a lot of founders, it's very hard to relinquish control, as you pointed out, Joe. It's your baby. You've created this brand from scratch. You love, everything that goes into it. But, I think as you sort of reach, let's call it, somewhere between that $1 and $5 million revenue mark, which I don't love to talk about revenue numbers. I think that, we should all be looking at net profit margins, but, I know that it's the common language here. And so at a point in time, it becomes pretty challenging to get to the level of depth that you need to in understanding everything that's happening in the business. So from 0 to 1 million, I think it's quite achievable. And I think that it's almost worth that experience of cutting your teeth and understanding, how to do everything from filing your taxes to dealing with stranded inventory to, trying to get in and understand, review sequences or what's happening. You need to know enough to be dangerous for you to actually succeed on these platforms. And so coming back to it, the journey is how do you start to bring in the right people that have expertise or a focus on specific things that are going to continue to move your business forward. So in that example that I gave with the woman's name is Wendy, in that example, her first sort of strategic move was that she was working with agencies and third-party providers and even, I would say AI technology, just like what you guys have on offer here, to reduce her output and provide the clarity that she needed in order to actually achieve that. So the only way she was able to do that was to bring in great people or great technology or great processes, but she's bringing them all in together. So, you know, the major thing that I try to illustrate in that presentation is that she was running her, you know, I think one of the classic examples that most founders get caught up in is that product development cycle. It's the part that everyone, you know, is very reluctant to relinquish, and they think that they have this magic gift that cannot be replicated. And if I hand this off to anyone else, my brand is not going to grow. I'm not going to bring great products to market. And the major thing is that there's definitely an understanding or an ability that, you know, people bring to the table, but it's slight refinements in that process that remove the individual. So, you know, as an example with that woman, Wendy, she would put on an Excel, you know, she'd be doing her competitor research. She'd be looking at like, what's the next hot product to bring to market? And, you know, she'd pull up like a bunch of Excel tabs. She had a method to her madness, but in her mind, it wasn't repeatable. She didn't have clarity on the criteria of what denotes like bringing a product to market. And when we sat and we worked with her, we effectively built out that criteria, and we said, you know, it needs to have this level of net profit margin. You need to have that, you know, to bring it to market doesn't make sense unless you can actually yield, you know, 60% gross profit margins, whatever the number was, right? And on the back of that, you know, the category, the materials, like we worked with her to build out very clearly, like, what does that look like? And then once you have that clarity on what, at the very least, a product looks like to bring to market, then you can start to say, well, I'm going to bring on a product researcher, because I know that in order for my marketplace business to thrive, I need to be launching, you know, 1-2 products a month, let's say, in her category. So you simply, as an individual owner operator, once you start hitting 2, 3, 4 million, you can't spend the 30, 40, 50 hours needed to actually bring a new product to market on an ongoing basis when you have all these other complexities to your business. So reworking that process, bringing in technology, and actually building out SOPs on how to deliver it enabled her to succeed. So I guess coming back to your question a little bit, you have to put in the work at the start. So you need to build, it's like taking one step forward to take 2 steps, or one step backward to take 2 steps forwards, rather. You need to put in the work to build out those processes. I mean, AI is a wonderful thing. You know, just leveraging ChatGPT today. If you put in the hard work and you go through that journey of questions and answers, and you input your, you know, the database of tasks and requirements and all the things that you know need to go into listing creation, which sounds very simple, but, you know, it's actually one of the more complex things, because you need to deal with supply chain logistics. You need to actually bring everything, you know, first photo, like everything needs to come together in order for you to actually launch a product. So coming back to it, putting in that work to document all the steps that need to happen, and building a very clear and linear onboarding process is really what's going to set you apart when it comes to actually bringing on talent. I think for a lot of people, they're not actually ready to start hiring. They think, I'm going to hire someone, I'm going to have them shadow me, and 9 times out of 10 that will fail. You'll get frustrated, and the talent won't be set up for success either.
Do you think there's anything that can't be put into an SOP and off-handed by the founder? Like, is there anything sacred in the business that only really motivated and kind of people there from the beginning who understand the vision of the company can do?
I think most things could be built. Like, I would say you could get most things to, let's say, 80% of the way there. And that's also like part of our delegation rule, is like, once you feel like you can give someone the tools to get something to 80% of the way that you'd like to see it, that's the time to offboard that responsibility on yourself, or rather that delivery mechanic, because you can always come in and give that feedback and give that criteria. So I would say most things can be delegated. You know, I work really hard every day to make myself redundant, and I think that's what everyone should be doing. How do you make yourself irrelevant is really it should really be the goal. And I think, you know, we could get into an interesting philosophical conversation of sort of how hard it is to let go of the ego in this journey of building business. But I think most things can definitely be delegated. I think where things become harder to delegate, or when we talk about the things that are it's not obvious, or it will take a material amount of time for you to be able to delegate, is like when you start talking about the vision of the business or the core values or the mission or things like that. I think that there's, again, in today's, and at least in my experience, you can get some great inputs from AI, but in order to truly drive forward and bring a lot of these things together, you still need to be sort of guiding that ship.
Yeah. Actually, let's talk a little bit about AI, because this is an AI for e-commerce podcast after all. Can you actually talk to us a little bit about how you use AI in your sort of day-to-day work and with your clients, and sort of what, I guess, what percentage of what you do is then helped by AI?
So, being honest here, I would say we're probably underutilizing it. There's definitely a lot more ways in which we could be leveraging AI today. Where we're seeing the most utility, I would say, is in a lot of our strategic planning work and the work that sort of sets the team up for success. So remembering, we're a team of approximately 85 people. So how we do our planning is we do first half of the year and second half of the year goals. And that's everything from leadership to finance to biz ops, marketing, sales, client success, recruitment, consulting. There's probably 10 functions that each need to have a hit or miss measure goal, hit or miss measures, a very specific timeline on how to execute on those 3 or 4 goals, and then also bringing that back to the financial metrics and the profitability of the business. So it's become a pretty big, arduous task, or it was at least. We built out a framework now, and we've built out a logic where, based on where we're looking to drive toward, all you need to do is answer a series of prompts, and through what we've built in ChatGPT, we are really finding a material way to reduce that time significantly, so it becomes a much higher level discussion. I would say that's away from an operations perspective that we're seeing a lot of success, in a way that what would have taken us probably like a week offsite, follow-ups, going through it, and probably a month-long process, cut down probably by a quarter of the time. We're probably doing that in a week now, and I think it will continue to improve.
AI is basically cutting all of the fun offsite meetings. Is that what you're trying to say? It's like all of your employees have to be like sour because you're not doing anything fun anymore.
The opposite. Now, when we do the offsite meetings, it's just mostly fun and less work, which is what you want. We're actually, in December, we're flying to the Philippines again, and yeah, it's a pretty awesome place to have your offsite meetings. But I think one other interesting thing, and this is probably more relevant to your listeners, as in, I hope that helps the listeners. But I sit across the marketing function, and one of the things that we built to both help our internal team, but also has turned out to be a really interesting SEO strategy for us, is that we built an AI logic for how to build job descriptions. So the other method that I didn't talk about was the 4 R's: role, responsibility, result, and requirements. And that's how we typically build our job descriptions internally. We now have a prompt where we answer 6 questions, and on the back of that, it spits out a job description based on all the parameters and inputs that we've had. That's pretty accurate. What I did with that is we built, maybe 1,000 of them, and we SEO optimize them, and now we have like 1,000 job descriptions that are SEO optimized, and it's driving tens of thousands of monthly hits where people are downloading these pre-built job descriptions. So I share this with you guys to say I'm certain that there's some smart ways that you guys can use it, if you're e-commerce or driving traffic, external traffic, as I believe it's called these days, for marketplace. But it used to be traffic back in my day.
So I want to kind of talk more about hiring offshore. So I know a lot of our listeners will probably have teams based in the Philippines. The conversation I was literally having before this call was we have a team of 8. Everyone is onshore, based in the same office. We're hybrid, but I really like having a team that can be in person, and I feel we can motivate better. But how? And I'm a little bit unsure about kind of hiring, offshoring anything in my company. But how would you approach hiring and finding talent and managing talent that you can't have in an office, let's say in the Philippines or wherever else, for obviously cheaper, but then it comes at a cost of a lot of other things.
Yeah, well, I would say that the cost, if I was looking at the cost that you might be referencing, in my mind, it's the upfront investment that ultimately is going to save you in the long term. So, I know it's great, and I love also, I come into our office every day, and there's a handful of us that work out of this office. Living in Tel Aviv, apartments are pretty small, and I've got 2 small kids at home, so I don't get any work done, and hence why I come into an office. But most of our team would be in the Philippines, and I would say, when you're looking at these types of realities, I think the first thing is don't think that you can hire every single person abroad that you can find locally. I think that that's a foolish move to try and just say I'm going to augment my entire team and bring on an entire emerging world talent pool to deliver. I've definitely been on the receiving end. We were building a technology product as an example, had a team of 15. Everything from programmers, front end, back end developers, user stories, technical lead, the list went on. Project manager, a lot of great talent, but we actually didn't have like an internal CTO or someone quite strategic who understood it. And so we dropped a lot of money into something that is just okay at best, and we stopped pushing forward. So coming back to the approach of, building offshore, I would say one is having a really strong knowledge base about your company, about what you stand for, around your processes is a really important tool. It's also an important tool if you're hybrid or if you're local. Coming back to it, I think that the logic that I was sharing before about how do I make myself redundant, the same goes into onboarding. So when I talked a moment ago about our goals and our planning, on the back of that planning, when we talk about a goal and a hit and miss measure and a project timeline, each activation stage inside of that will have a very clearly defined project brief. So, when we're putting this level of work into it, you do it, it might take you a day to put each briefing together, but I don't need to think about that for the rest of the 6 months. I don't need to come back and give anyone guidance or direction. And I think the same should be true in how you run a business. You want the time that you spend together, whether it's, having a few beers on a Friday afternoon or, in the office and socializing or, having a productive strategic or executional meeting. I think those are the times where you make the most of it. But to have to be pulled in and say, I can't get access to this piece of technology, or, can you send me that file again?
Specifically, I used to work at Amazon, so I'm used to managing a international team. Right? I had a team that was international. But there's a piece on the onboarding where I think it's very important to have the first week or 2 in the office, so the team members ramping up, and then maybe after a month or 2 they can be based in Spain or wherever they are, and that's fine because they understand the company, and then you see them once a quarter or once every 6 months, and that's fine. But how do you manage? I imagine for a lot of our listeners, thinking about hiring in the Philippines, something like that, realistically, they're not going to have an onboarding process where someone is in person for 2 weeks. Let's say they're in London, right? They're not going to. I imagine they don't fly. Most of your customers aren't flying out their talent out to London for 2 weeks and putting them up somewhere. So how do you manage, and I think that's a really critical piece of a new employee's journey, is just learning the culture from being with the people, understanding the people and the personalities, that they're working with, and what's acceptable, what isn't acceptable, and like obviously you can tell people the mission, but feeling the mission and the vision and feeling part of a team. So how do you do all of that stuff with someone in the emerging world, or it doesn't have to be emerging world?
Yeah.
Totally.
Great question, Max. So I'll give you a couple of examples in a second, just to show you sort of some of the ways that we've approached this and what's worked for us. I would say, as Multiply Me the business, we have a 7 C's onboarding framework, and this is sort of part of our value proposition, is how do we help actually guide people who haven't gone through this process before to actually build a really strong sort of reality where they're going to see, all but guarantee success in working in an environment they might not be familiar with. But as it relates to how you actually approach this, I would say, my question to you would be, what are the things that you experience in trying to capture the culture and the essence in that 2 weeks that you feel that you cannot when you talk about providing that collateral and material? Like, what are the things that you feel like you can only garner by sitting in a room with someone?
I think attention. I think when you have people remote, you never really know if they are on their phone or listening intently. Whereas if you're in a room, what we would do at eContent is, each leader will kind of sit there and run through front end and run through back end and run through whatever, like I'd talk about the vision and, and then, so we'd have like a full 2-3 days of in room, everyone's there talking about the different aspects of the company. I don't think you can replicate that kind of thing remotely, because I think, being in the room, the new person is heightened, they're probably adrenaline is going, they're slightly nervous, there's all these new people, they're focused, they're taking notes, asking questions. It is, you can't replicate that, in my opinion. Well, I'm asking you, can you replicate that virtually?
So I don't know that you can exactly replicate that particular experience, to your point, the excitement or the heightened emotion and, being stimulated by new faces and new people, that's not behind a situation that we're in right here. Yeah. But what I would say is there's definitely technology and there's definitely processes that you can implement to, create a not too dissimilar experience. So just to give you some examples here, we have a process improvement management consultancy, a Scala. It's about 25 management consultants. A lot of them came from Ernst & Young originally, and sort of our focus has been on the SME space. When someone is onboarded through a Scala, and today they don't even necessarily need to have management consulting experience to actually work with us, is how we've built our training and onboarding program. Is the first 2 weeks is totally async. So you will go through. So we have a platform called Trainual. Anyone can use Trainual, but it's a great knowledge base and onboarding platform whereby you will effectively be able to delegate to people sort of their onboarding journey. And through that journey, you can actually see percentage of completion. You can reset it. You can update aspects of it. You can see the company org chart inside of it. And you can sort of, effectively craft an experience where you have to complete certain tasks and certain onboarding collateral in order to actually progress. And so how we will approach that is they'll go through sort of the self-assessment elements where there'll be recorded videos of different aspects of how we operate, examples of work. In the Scala case, they'll actually have to go through, effectively like a live case study in this education where they're going to deliver a project at the start. And we will have regular check-ins. We'll even do things like a lunch experiences where they'll meet different people. They'll be given effectively like a buddy or a mentor inside of the business. And so as much as possible, we're creating a situation where you're getting the knowledge base. You're not requiring someone's, personal time, but you're creating a personal touch to it where there's actual footage of people that they're going to meet. So I think like one way that we're able to create that, sense of excitement or that sort of, interesting first steps is that you watch recordings of people and then later in that week you'll actually meet the people. And it's like, you've already built this like weird sense of like, kind of, for them, it's like, I kind of know you, but I don't really know you. It's probably not too dissimilar, Max, Joe, when you're out at accelerate, and people have listened and seen your podcast, and they come up to you and I listen to all your episodes. I find it so valuable. So I think it creates that level of relationship and engagement. I would say one thing that we really focus on when we talk about not just onboarding, but from a company culture in general, is to also promote where you can have live interactions and experiences. So what we'll often do is, we're fortunate that we're flying the whole team to Manila, and we're going to do this. It's the second time this year that we've been out, which is awesome. For the first 4 years or nearly 5 years of the business, though, we never actually made it out to the Philippines. It was the start of Corona as we launched the business. And, so it really, we were remote first by design, but, our goal was really to spend more face time and build those personal connections. So coming to it, we'll have multiple times a year where we'll get, either the teams will give them budget to get together, spend a weekend together, have them spend that time together. Or we always do a massive Christmas party, which is just, I think in the Philippines, but general in Asian culture, just it's a massive thing to do. So we really sort of dial that stuff up. But yeah, I would say the last thing I would say when it comes to sort of those early days in those onboardings is inside of this 7 C's framework, and what we really hold ourselves to is, getting those quick wins. So meeting the different departments, building personal relationships, not focusing just on work output to start with, but it's knowledge absorption and relationship building across the business to build sort of that grander perspective. And then always having projects that have, what we would call like quick wins, ensuring that, they're seeing some success and they're excited about what they're working on, even if it's not the most valuable project to the business. As long as we can instill that sort of sentiment and that feeling as to we value them, then that's really what we want to achieve in those first 90 days.
I would absolutely agree with you, Yoni. For the last 6 years, I've actually worked completely remote, and all of the teams that I've managed were all spread, loads in London, loads in just everywhere around Europe and the US. And what I found what worked for me is actually going back to the fact that you are working with a person who actually, probably gives a shit about the company they work, but in the end, we are all humans. Our own self-interest is at the core of why we're doing what we're doing. And a lot of the time, it's not about money. Like a lot of the time, money is obviously one motivator, but another motivator is just your self-development, your self-perception, how you want to express yourself in front of your other colleagues. And if you understand that and you are able to entwine all of your objectives, like your onboarding process, how you manage people, how you communicate with them, with their own sort of self-development goals, then you don't have to check if they're paying attention. They will be paying attention because it's in their own self-interest. They are there to prove themselves, to build themselves to be something. And so I think it's just always about the approach of basically the classic adage, which is put yourself in the shoes of the other person and figure out what they are trying to achieve, and then kind of help them do that by aligning it with your own company's goals. So that has generally worked for me. Question, because I really want to touch upon the sort of the process piece, because I think it's also another challenge for a lot of how can I say, e-commerce businesses. And if I niche down specifically to Amazon sellers, at which point do you think, because in this space, if you are an Amazon seller, you go to all of these conferences, everybody's like, try this, there's this new hack, there's this new approach, it's so cool, it works, and there's just basically always something new to try. So how often would you say that Amazon sellers should be re-evaluating or redeveloping their SOPs, and what is a material change that has to be reflected and what is just a fad?
Yeah, great question, but also loved your explanation and couldn't agree more. I think to look at it simply, if you have clarity on what your mission is as your business, you can align KPIs and performance metrics to individuals who also career aspirations are aligned with that, then it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. And if you acknowledge that, if you can really instill those core values that we personally have just spent a long time reworking ours and making sure that we find meaningful ways to integrate into the business, I think that, you see a reality where, like I said, it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. To your question about, when should you update processes? I often wonder for a lot of the Amazon sellers that get to literally every event, and they have, no real team behind them. I don't know how they get any work done. It's pretty amazing to me. But I would say first is like, when should you actually produce standard operating procedures and processes at a starting point? I would say, like, one, if you are a solopreneur, if you have no intention of looking to bring someone on in the short term, if you don't really care about taking time off, then, don't really waste your time investing in building process. I would say the same would be said for if you're trying to just, let's say you came up with a new piece of technology and you're trying to figure out, will this actually work? Is this something that can actually create value in my business? I wouldn't build the SOP for it at that moment in time. I would say, like, the advice that we typically give, and like, if I look at a Scala, we won't work with companies that are sort of 6 months into their, tenure and haven't really figured anything out, and they don't really have anything that's uniquely theirs, or they're not really aware of their processes. It's got to be a bit of time until you're saying, this is something that makes sense. This is a repeatable task, and this is when I should build out a process. It's a tough one. It's a tough one to explain without sort of visual aids, but I hope everyone follows along with what I'm about to share. But how we look at process, a lot of people talk about SOPs, and the value that they have, and everyone wants a free SOP. That is like what we would define as like a bottom-up approach, where people would typically build out the standard operating procedure for how to do, listing optimization. But in actuality, what you want to do is you want to look at the business holistically. So in our methodology, we have 5 layers of process. So you have the high-level process maps. So it's the process groups and the core processes of your business. So that might be for an e-commerce business, sales and marketing, product research and development, inventory management, and customer support might be the 4. And then inside of those boxes, it's like research, new product, contact, supplier, source, new product might be the, sort of the process groups. And then inside of each one of those would be what we define as a level 3. And that is literally at the individual level now. So the sourcing associate will get the request to upgrade product. They'll look to create the spec sheet. On the back of the spec sheet, they'll find an engineer. So you pretty much want to go through your business and understand top down, how does everything interact? And then once you understand how everything interacts at its biggest pieces, what are the nuanced step-by-step delivery that everything needs to actually happen to achieve? And then every one of those steps should then become a standard operating procedure in your company wiki. And so that's how you would structure it. When you would look to actually update a process and when that starts to make sense is if you're starting to deviate in a material way from the things that are working. So that can be for, a number of different reasons. It could be one, how we assess companies when we do our current state assessment. We interview everyone individually who has, touches on an aspect of a process. Let's stick with, sourcing a new product. So, we might interview the brand manager or, let's call it the founder and the sourcing associate. We'll interview them individually, and then we'll come back and we'll do validation, and we'll actually see if what each one of them says is the actual process that it follows. Many times there's slight deviations. And so I would say that based on, the things that are starting to become bottlenecks would be another reason why you would look to reassess and change that process. It's not a very sexy topic to talk about, but it's an important one.
Yeah, definitely an important one. And I think, thanks for your time, Yoni. I guess we've covered a lot of wide range of kind of strategic and process and tactical stuff and hiring. So it's been great. So I guess, do you want to just kind of spend 2 minutes talking about how you can help the listeners and how they could find you also?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, in terms of like how we help businesses, we can do it in 2 ways. I mean, one, the simplest way is if you're looking to hire talent in the Philippines and you want someone else to do the legwork for you, help you understand who you can hire, everything from employer of record, pay healthcare, social security, HMO, feel like the work, sort of being a real HR business partner, then Multiply Me, MII, is definitely, that's what we do. And we have like a really interesting integrated offer with a Scala where we'll come in and we do what's called a rapid business assessment. And in it, we can sort of look at the high layers of a business and effectively help you understand what part of your business makes the most sense to outsource. And when I say outsource, I mean bring in remote talent. So what part of your business can you actually, create a much more profitable function, and we can actually help sort of build that pathway to building everything from the SOPs and process maps to actually hiring the talent in for companies. So that would be the best way. We are escala.com, multiplyme.com, and I'll drop you guys all of these different ebooks that I said.
We'll put it in the description so people can find that.
Awesome.
But yeah, thanks so much, and great to see you, Joe. Hope you have a great time in your speaking event in Sweden.
Thanks, Yoni. Thanks for being